Today on Bridges, we are talking about breaking free from hidden patterns of abuse. I'm Monica Schmelter. I want to welcome you to Bridges today. Today, we are talking about breaking free from hidden patterns of abuse and unmasking narcissism. And Kenza Haddock is my guest. She's no stranger to Bridges. She's been here before. She's a speaker. She's an author. She's a licensed biblical counselor. So when we talk about breaking free today, we will do it from a practical standpoint, but also the biblical component. So Kenza, thanks for staying on and doing a second show with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful. Thank you.
You know, when I think about that word narcissist, I mean, it's such a negative connotation, and we all want to stay away from it. Yet, lots of times we get locked in a chosen relationship, and then sometimes those relationships that aren't chosen. And we've got to be able to identify the abuse, but then like to break free from it. So in the book, Unmasking Narcissism, you talk about 4 ways. What are those?
Yes. So the way I would respond to narcissistic abuse in my life is going to be different from the way you respond or the way someone else responds. And so there's a misconception out there that narcissistic abuse is a one-size-fits-all. And it's not. Just because we have different personalities, we were all created in God's image, we all respond differently. And so one of the 4 ways we may respond to narcissistic abuse, we call it it's like we get in the habit of self-destructive cycle. So someone who has experienced abuse over and over, even if it's not, a lot of times we give, I would say, less depth to emotional abuse rather than physical abuse. And just because it's emotional and verbal, it doesn't make it any less hurtful. In fact, they've done research showing that rejection affects the brain. And that's not to take away from physical abuse either, but the research shows that rejection, being rejected over and over, affects the brain in a way that it lasts longer than physical abuse.
Wow.
And so emotional abuse really does hurt. And so does, narcissistic abuse is a form of emotional abuse sometimes. And so we may respond in a way that is self-destructive. And that person, we call it also self-sabotage. Self-sabotage is when I have literally been through so much abuse that I've written myself off as someone who's unlovable. And so therefore, now that doesn't make me not want love anymore. See, that's where they live. They feel like, oh no, I'm unlovable, I don't want love, that's fine. No, we just find other ways to seek comfort. And normally the self-sabotage usually shows up in forms that people are not going to respond through compassion. For example, someone who's self-sabotaging, they're going to turn to addiction. They're going to turn to pornography. They're going to turn to self-mutilation. And unfortunately, this is something that's stigmatized, but usually we don't look at the person as, okay, you're hurting. How can I help you? And I'm not talking about enabling that person, but as we talked about before the episode, God is a compassionate God, and so part of, if you're stuck in that cycle of self-sabotage where you're constantly just self-deprecating, like giving yourself a hard time, you want to, first of all, yes, get in the presence of God, give yourself to the Lord if you haven't. And start spending time with the Lord and literally seeing what God says about you first. So that's just one.
Because that's our foundation.
Oh, absolutely.
That's truth. I think that one of the things that a guest said to me that I've just held with me for a lot of years, that it was just striking because I hadn't thought about it. You were talking about like self-mutilation. Addiction, these things that people use to cope. And the woman had been trapped in addiction. And she said, Monica, everybody told me what I needed to do. Nobody asked me what I needed. And I thought, oh, yeah, well, we get so scared when somebody's addicted, right? We want to tell them what to do because we don't want them to die. We don't want bad things to happen, but we're not necessarily keyed in that we might need to listen to what's happened to this person? Why do they keep repeating this? And it's the same thing with the other things, that you mentioned, the ways that we cope. Sometimes you got to get to the root of it.
Absolutely. We try to fix them, especially when they're loved ones. We try to fix, and that's the worst thing we can do. I mean, think about Jesus when he was with the woman who was caught in adultery. He didn't tell her, go sin no more, and then I'll forgive you, right? He said, where are your condemners? She said, basically, they're gone. And he said, neither do I. Right. He spoke life into her. Now go and sin no more, because we have to have life spoken into us to empower us to be able to live out the identity that God already has given us through the death and resurrection of Jesus. And so that's one, and it's very difficult. The second one, I actually fell into it, and that's the cycle of rebellion. And I know it has a negative connotation, yes, but yes, really what it is, because of the trauma I went through in my life, I decided I'm not going to trust anyone. I'm going to reject anyone that tries to love me. I'm just going to, it's like I was just living and behind closed doors. I mean, really, I was just, and it's bred out of fear. And by doing that, unfortunately, and I know I call it rebellion because we're shutting out people that God may be trying to use in our lives to speak life into us. The problem with that stance is not only do we shut out people who are toxic to us, we shut out people who can help us. We shut out community, and we're not meant to live life on our own. And so to that person who is listening and is like, well, I'm tired of trusting people and just for them to let me down, I always say what I've done in my life, and that is, it's not that your discernment is broken, it's that during the time in which you were abused, you were not in touch with who you truly are in the Lord. And so when that, just open yourself up to certain relationships, pray, ask the Lord to bring people into your life. Mm-hmm. And yes, people are not perfect. Some people are going to to hurt you. Some people may inadvertently say something that is negative to you. But we have to learn the art of forgiveness, and we also have to understand that just because someone hurts us in the past does not mean we're still living that way in the present. That's why forgiveness is a huge component.
Because, we also have to realize that people do make mistakes, like you said. Yeah. And that offer of forgiveness, if it's someone that hurts us over and over and over again, yes, biblically we have to forgive them, but we don't have to get right back into the relationship. No. But when we open our hearts up to other people, and when we prayed for God to bring some safe people, that safe, wonderful person is probably going to make a mistake at some point. Yeah. And that's okay to forgive and to move forward if there's not a lot of abuse going on, right? Yes. Like if that's just kind of a one-time mistake or human error, we can forgive and continue in that relationship.
Oh, absolutely. For me, personally, because I was still healing, when my husband came into my life, I rejected him when he asked me out, and he wanted to just start going out and getting to know each other, because he seemed different. But also, not only did he seem different, I also was so closed off that I almost never, thankfully the Lord had already planned it, in advance, and thankfully he didn't give up. But we can shut out the right person in our lives if we're not careful. So we need to practice forgiveness, and we also need to surrender our hurts to the Lord. And there are other practical things that we can do. Yeah.
So you talked about the two of them. What are some of the other ways?
Over-accommodation. The over-accommodator, aka people pleaser, and the narcissist are like a magnet to each other. Okay, so the over-accommodator's motto is, how can I serve you? The narcissist's motto is, how can you serve me? So that person, I see so many people who fall into that category, and it's very hard for them to pull out of it, because they look at it as service, and I'm here to help you, and I'm here to, and so they get caught up in the cycle of, well, I can change this person. No, you cannot change. Boundaries start with realizing that you don't deserve to be treated that way, and don't give yourself permission to be spoken to that way. And we'll talk more about how to actually set those boundaries in practical terms. The fourth type is, unfortunately, sometimes a narcissistic abuse relationship will breed another narcissist, and that's the arrogant person.
Oh, I can't imagine how that would work.
Yes. and they're all me, both of them are me. Of course, they're not going to get along, but that person goes out and hurts a group of people, and this person stays here and hurts another group of people. Because if you remember in the earlier episode, we talked about how the narcissist is like the eye of the storm. The eye of the storm is rarely chaotic. It's everything around that eye.
Yes. Yes. Well, because, and I think like when you talk about the people pleaser and wanting to serve, it can be confusing because in Christian circles, we say we're servant leaders, right? We serve one another in love. And there's a healthy serving, but then there's a really unhealthy one. There's a sense of, you know, wanting to accommodate people that is very life-giving, that thinks about things from other people's perspective, that wants to accommodate, you know, an inconvenience to help, like with a sincere, genuine desire to help. But then it's where we go over that line where it becomes abusive, that no matter how much we do, it's not enough. Whatever we come up with, it's not enough. And then that cycle of just trying to keep. So how do people get out of that? Because it really is easy to fall into. Well,
first we have to recognize that we are in that cycle of being burned out, especially if you identify with the people pleasing and over accommodating, you're going to start feeling burned out. And here are some symptoms of feeling burned out.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it hits you with sleep. You're so tired, but then you can't rest at night, or you start feeling resentful. And here's the heartbreaking thing about someone who's in the over-accommodating cycle. When they start resenting, they feel guilty for resenting, and then they use Bible verse to even further their guilt. Sometimes we can misuse Bible verses and say, no, I'm supposed to be this way. No. That is not. They mistake it for righteous suffering. No, righteous suffering is not enduring narcissistic abuse.
No, that's not persecution.
No.
You know, and I think, you know, the Bible says that God's word is living, it's active, and it's sharper than any two-edged sword. So if we apply the word in the right way, it cuts away what doesn't need to be there. But there are people who use Bible verses literally to hurt other people. It's an inaccurate interpretation and use of, you know, to condemn, to keep somebody stuck in something. So I think we have to be self-aware of that. Like, what is the motivation behind this Bible verse? Does it get me closer to Christ? Does it bring me more freedom? Or does it just hurt and make me feel worse than I already do?
No, as you were talking, I thought about Galatians, where it says, don't get weary in doing what is good, because in due time you'll reap a harvest. So that can be misconstrued, misused. No, that doesn't mean you need to endure narcissistic abuse, because what if it doesn't get better? What are we going to say about God? Oh, God is not coming through on the promise. That's not true.
And that is how people come to places of disappointment with God, come to places of wanting to deconstruct their faith. They come to a place of, you know what? This Christian thing doesn't work, because I kept on doing X, Y, Z, and I kept on trying harder, and things just got worse. So we've got to take a break. We've got to take a break here for just a moment. I want you to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to continue to look at unmasking narcissism and talk about practical ways that you can get free and stay free from those hidden patterns of abuse. We'll be right back.
Don't give in. God's word says you're an overcomer. If you hadn't done blah, 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 this wouldn't have happened. And let me say this to you. If you think that you are in a mess of your own making, you are still an overcomer. When that temptation comes, you want to make sure that you are dressed for battle. Therefore, put on every piece of God's armor so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. It takes training. It takes discipline. And so when you're fighting that good fight of the faith, you take your story, whatever it is, and you saturate it in faith, and you fight for it.
Visit monicaschmelter.com to schedule Monica to speak at your next event.
So today we are talking about breaking free from hidden patterns of abuse. And Kenza, I am so grateful that you flew in and joined us today to talk about this, because it really is harmful to people.
Absolutely.
Emotional abuse, being in a toxic relationship with a narcissist. And I think the tendency as a Christian, and it is good to pray. It really is good to pray, but you also got to flee from sin, right? You've also got to figure out, well, how do I get out of this? How do I break free? Yes. So help us with that today.
Yes, sometimes we as believers can mistake toxic for righteous suffering, and that's not the same thing. Toxic is toxic. And so one of the practical ways we are commanded to respond to evil is, yes, to pray for evil. And we are, if someone hurts us, we are to forgive them. Now, forgiveness and reconciliation are two totally different things. And that's where sometimes it gets too murky. Yeah. And so we have to remember, I can forgive someone who has hurt me and is choosing not to change, and forgive them from a distance. It doesn't mean I need to reconcile that relationship, because another thing, boundaries are huge. And one thing I like to include is boundaries were instituted by God first. I mean, think about the garden. He took Adam and placed him in the garden. He said, you can eat from any tree except for the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's a boundary right there.
Yes.
Boundaries are meant to protect relationships and make sure they're kept healthy. Boundaries are like you closing the door at night to make sure that, no unwanted person just rolls right in.
Yep.
And so that's part of us stewarding. And I think when it comes to unhealthy relationships or relationships with a narcissistic person, we can, as we talked about, misuse Bible verses like, we are to bear each other's burdens. We're not supposed to get beat up and be doormats.
No.
That is not part of God's will for us.
And that verse, bear each other's burdens, that burden is referring to something that is out of the ordinary, a situation that is too heavy for one person to carry. We help them with that prayerfully or practically, however that works. We're not bearing one another's burdens doesn't mean we have to pay other people's bills because they're just trying to manipulate us to do that. That's not what the word means. And so understanding God's word as best we can is super important in all of this. And I know, especially for people that have low self-esteem or in certain Christian circles, the word boundaries seems mean and off-putting and like we shouldn't do that. But like you said, boundaries are meant to protect, to keep the bad away. I most assuredly lock the doors of our house. I don't keep them open.
Yes.
If someone comes in, they're going to have to break in. Yes. I'm not going to just leave everything open. So boundaries are good. But what about the person who they don't see it from that standpoint just yet? How do they get used to that?
I tell this all the time. Listen, the first time you set a boundary, you're going to feel bad. The second time you set it, you're going to feel bad. It takes a couple of times for your brain to associate a boundary is actually good for the integrity of the relationship. Now, if somebody doesn't respond to that boundary in a healthy way, that's okay. It says more about that person. Now, for example, let's just say like I go into a space and that person is just always demeaning to me, right? Or they give me backhanded compliments, or that person is just flat out mean to me. My responsibility as a child of God who is responsible for stewarding my emotional health, mental health, physical health, is to say, hey, listen, you may not, the first time, you may not have meant it this way, but when you talk to me like that, I felt X, Y, and Z. If they say, I'm sorry you feel that way and are demeaning, you can continue the relationship. You can continue the conversation and say, hey, listen, if you continue to speak to me this way, I'm going to have to end the call. I'm going to have to leave this space because I'm not going to be treated that way. What you're doing is setting that boundary. You're not calling them names. You're not saying anything. You're just telling them this is not how I'm going to be treated. Now, that person may storm off. That person may hang up on you first. And you're going to feel like, did I overstep? Did I do something bad? That is okay. That's your brain literally recalibrating and getting used to you setting those healthy boundaries. So expect the first probably 5 to 7 times for you to feel bad, because I did. I felt awful the first couple of times.
Well, I did too, because I didn't know what I was allowed to say. Right? And if it is an unhealthy relationship, that person will not like the boundary.
No.
And they might, because I remember one time being in that situation where I was really being demeaned on the phone, and I had practiced really hard to say, I really want to talk to you, but if you continue to talk to me that way, I'm going to have to disconnect the call. And then that person got even meaner.
Yes.
Well, of course you're going to disconnect the call because you don't want to hear what I have to say.
Yeah.
But I do want to hear what you have to say. I just don't want to be mistreated in the
Yes.
process. So if you're already struggling and that's unhealthy, I think we should also expect to feel badly and that the other person might not appreciate it.
Yes.
Because we've been letting them walk all over us. So
Yes.
this is like something new.
Yes, absolutely. The emotional capacity of a true narcissist is that of a toddler's. Okay, I mean, and it's true. So imagine I'm telling my toddler, no, they're going to stomp all over the floor because they don't
And
like
they're going to
no.
cry and they're going
Yes.
to lay down on the floor. And the thing
Yes.
is, when they're toddlers, you know, that
Yes.
it's not lovely, but they are cute.
Yeah.
Like they're just so adorable and they don't know any better.
Yeah.
They don't have impulse control because they're toddlers.
Yes.
But for a 30-year-old or a
Yes.
40-year-old, like
Yes.
it's really not attractive.
No, it's not. And it makes you want to just end that relationship
Mhm.
or at least create space. And that is something that it takes work and
Mhm.
it takes time. And that person may hang up the phone and go and try to smear your name elsewhere. Just remember, your reputation belongs to God. Submit your
Amen.
reputation to God and know that He's going to protect it. And you know what? If someone else decides to believe what that person says, it's only a matter of time. Because again, a narcissistic person, unless they truly seek help, they're going to do the same thing
Right.
to everyone else
Right.
around them.
And typically, the truth about those sorts of things does come out.
Yes.
But even if it doesn't, I love that you said we trust our reputation
Yes.
to God, because the thing is, we cannot control what people think about us or what they say about us. And even our most well-intended comment,
Yes.
if it's interpreted the wrong way or by an unhealthy person and they slander us or do whatever, it's easy to say, but it's hard to live with. We're not in control of that. There is
No.
nothing that we can do other than trust God.
Yes.
We can't make that stop, and we make ourselves look
Yes.
ridiculous when we try to stop
Yes.
what we can't stop.
Sometimes they'll use that,
Mhm.
us trying to defend ourselves against us to say, you
Mhm.
know, see that person, make you question your reality. See, that
Exactly.
person is not stable. See, that person is, when the reality is you're just responding. And so, yes, entrust your relationship to God or your reputation
Yes.
to God. Another thing that I would get asked about is the person will say, well, I have forgiven the person. I have set boundaries, but I still have this inkling like that
Yeah.
there's something off in my heart. And I say, have you renounced and submitted the inner vows that you have made with yourself to God? And here's an example of inner vow. A lot of inner vows that we make can be socially acceptable. Here's an example. As I shared in previous episodes, I grew up in it was a dysfunctional home. There was trauma growing up. And so I made an inner vow when I had my kids, I'm going to be the best mom I can be in my whole life. So
And that sounds wonderful.
oh, it does.
sounds
It's
wonderful.
like, what's wrong with that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, what is wrong with that?
Here's the problem. The best mom in my mind was not the same standard as the mom that God had given me. So the best mom in my mind was I needed to do everything for my kids. I needed to be perfect. So every time I fell short of that standard, the enemy would come in, or I have these thoughts that, see, you fell short. You're just like so-and-so. You're this awful mom. You're an awful. So I opened the door essentially inadvertently to all of these accusations. The reality is, so I had to renounce it and say, Lord, I am so sorry. You never called me to be a perfect mom. That inner vow came out of hurt. Lord, teach me how to be the mom you called me to be, to steward my kids' lives.
Right. And what's important, and you do talk about
Yeah.
inner vows in the book, and the book again is Unmasking Narcissism, because I think
Yeah.
the inner vow thing, like it can sound complicated or whatever,
Yeah.
but we do it all the time.
Oh, yes.
Whether it's, to be the best wife in the world, best mom in the
Yes.
world, or things like, when we grow up, I'm like not going to do that.
Yes.
Whatever the XYZ
Yes.
dysfunctional behaviors are
Yes.
or were. And
Yeah.
we do it with good intentions, but it does open the door for condemnation every time we make a mistake.
Yes.
And the thing is, like, I wanted to be a perfect mom too, but
Yeah.
like, we're not perfect people.
No.
And the most wonderful thing, a wonderful component of being a parent is being able to model for our children how to give and extend forgiveness.
Yes.
Okay, I messed up. Like,
Yes.
I yelled at you in a tone of voice, or I didn't discipline you
Yes.
in the best way. I gave in to anger at the
Yes.
moment, and I'm sorry.
Yes.
Will you forgive me?
Yes.
That teaches a child so
Yes.
much. And so we beat ourselves up with things that are actually opportunities.
Yes. It's like the antidote to any pride or any wounds. Sometimes it's humility, like you mentioned. Yeah. Saying, hey, I am so sorry.
Mhm.
I shouldn't have done that. I didn't look at the situation correctly. And sometimes our inner vows are protective in nature, but they're only shutting us out. Like, I will never trust a pastor because I was hurt by, a church person, or I'll never.
Happens all the time.
Absolutely. And then we're making these inner vows, and we don't know that the way our brain works is we make an inner vow, we will live by that vow.
Absolutely.
And we have to break it.
And that's where, like, as you've been talking about spending time with God and praying,
Yes.
that He can reveal to us commitments or inner vows that we made even a long
Yes.
time ago that we don't realize.
Yes.
I remember talking to a friend whose husband had cheated on her. Now
Yeah.
they reconciled that marriage, but she made this inner vow: I will never trust anyone completely again, or let myself be financially vulnerable to anybody.
Yeah.
Well, that wreaked havoc in her life.
Yeah.
I understand she wanted to protect herself, like it was a good thing, but she did have to step aside from that and renounce that in order for that marriage to fully be restored, because her
Absolutely.
life was hurt.
Yes. No, that's a real life example. Absolutely. And God is a God of restoration. He can restore us from the hurts, whether it's through reconciliation or through moving forward
Yes.
and just moving forward with our lives. And He will bring people in our lives that will help us in our walk with Him, for sure.
And we're out of time, but sometimes moving forward
Yes.
is the most godly thing that we can do to maintain who we are, our self-respect, and be able to live for the Lord. But we're out of time. So thank you so much, Kenza, for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching Bridges. Finding hope in today's life is not always easy. Bridges with Monica Schmelter is making it simple. You can now listen to podcast episodes on popular platforms like iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Life Audio, and more by searching for Monica Schmelter to find God's hope for your journey. Life can be hard and days can be long. So if you're looking for hope for the journey, monicaschmelter.com is a great place to get started. On monicaschmelter.com, you'll find Monica's teachings on demand. And if you're looking to really grow your faith, you'll find online extras are available with every teaching. So don't wait another day. Get started now at monicaschmelter.com and you will find hope for the journey.
If you enjoy watching Bridges, you can join Monica on Facebook for all the extras. Just visit Facebook and search for Monica Schmelter TV. At Monica Schmelter TV, you'll get a look behind the scenes. You'll learn secrets from the studio, and you'll be among the first to know what's coming up next on Bridges. Best of all, you can connect with Monica for prayer and share what topics you'd most like to see on Bridges. Monica would love to connect with you.